What's up, everyone? If you're seeing this, that means I've probably been banned. That's right. Cancel culture has finally come for me. Oh my God, it's over. It's over. The free speech warriors. Where are you now? They've taken me out, ladies and gentlemen. It's over. I'm done. A couple days ago, I had a conversation where I was responding to the Republican House of Representatives Speaker, and I said some things. Let's take a look at what I said. Libs of TikTok, of course, posted about it. Here is what Libs of TikTok claimed I was saying. Hassan Parker just called for violence against a sitting U.S. senator. If you cared about Medicaid fraud, you would kill Rick Scott at FBI. This got 17,000 likes. This was on February 28th. Let's take a look at this clip really quickly.
There's about $50 billion estimated that are lost every year in Medicaid, just in fraud alone.
If you cared about Medicare fraud or Medicaid fraud, you would kill Rick Scott, okay? You wouldn't make Rick Scott, former governor of Florida, Rick Scott, you wouldn't make him a prominent part of the Republican Party. Now, that seems like a wild thing to say. Oh my God. Is this person calling for the death of a U.S. senator? Of course not. I was not calling for the assassination of a U.S. senator. So I went back to figure out the context. Here it is. Let's take a look.
Are people who are covered by Medicaid now going to potentially lose Medicaid coverage as a result of this?
No, look, the White House has made a commitment. The president said over and over and over, we're not going to touch Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid. We've made the same commitment. Now, that said, what we are going to do is go into those programs and carve out the fraud, waste, and abuse and find efficiencies. Couple of examples. You know, there's about $50 billion estimated that are lost every year in Medicaid, just in fraud alone.
That fraud is not coming from individuals. It's coming from providers. They're not tackling providers. They're not actually going after like false billing. They are trying to cut recipients. If you cared about Medicare fraud or Medicaid fraud, you would kill Rick Scott. The reason why I'm saying if you cared about Medicare or Medicaid fraud, you would kill Rick Scott is because, and not make him a prominent part of the Republican Party, is because he to this day is still known as committing the largest Medicare fraud in U.S. history. They want to cut SNAP. They want to cut Medicaid. They want to cut the funding of Medicaid. They want to make it harder for people to receive Medicaid. They don't want to actually go after medical providers or the insurance companies or the nursing homes that are lining their pockets with major donations. Those are the people who actually engage in the fraud. It's not your uncle that's like lying about their condition and stealing money from the government by, going to the doctor or whatever. Okay, so obviously I shouldn't have used hyperbolic language, and there's definitely some ownership that I must take. Some apologies there. I should not have said Mike Johnson should kill Rick Scott. I should have simply said Mike Johnson should punish Rick Scott, perhaps with the, maximum punishment, whatever that would be, for defrauding Medicare and Medicaid for over $1.7 billion. Now, let's talk about the things that he did in this process, because Rick Scott co-founded the Columbia Hospital Corporation, which later merged to a corporation known as Columbia/HCA, which eventually became the nation's largest for-profit healthcare company. Rick Scott, who of course also looks like Voldemort, did a lot of things. The company defrauded Medicare, Medicaid, and other federal programs. The U.S. Department of Justice won 14 felony convictions against the company, which was fined $1.7 billion in what was at the time the largest healthcare fraud settlement in United States history.
HCA was defrauding the government.
HCA admitted to things like submitting inflated bills and exaggerating diagnoses to increase Medicare reimbursements.
According to federal investigators, the hospital company systematically defrauded Medicare, Medicaid, and other federal healthcare programs while paying kickbacks to its physicians. Scott, of course, denied any wrongdoing.
Scott pled the fifth 75 times to avoid jail for Medicare fraud.
He didn't go to jail over this. He didn't even get any punishments over this. And Scott's resignation certainly was fantastic. For his pockets, he walked away with $10 million in severance pay, a 5-year consulting contract, and $300 million in stock and options. He is now the wealthiest member of the United States Senate. Rick Scott also in the past apologized, took ownership seemingly over his actions, but since then, in his endless interest in gutting all of these social safety nets so the American poor suffer more, Rick Scott has actually seemingly turned around and thinks that this was political prosecution, pure political prosecution against him.
No, I'm fed up. I watched what happened to me and my company. I've watched what's happened. I've talked to business people over the years, what's happened to them when you have political persecution.
What I was simply trying to say is Republicans don't care about the actual fraud that takes place in terms of government entitlements programs, in terms of government expenditure, because if they did, they obviously would punish Rick Scott. Rick Scott would not be a prominent fixture of the Republican Party. Rick Scott, who was elected as the governor of Florida after he committed the largest Medicare fraud in U.S. history at the time.
$73 million. That's the amount that we know about so far that Scott and the Republican Party spent on TV advertising.
Rick Scott, who then went on to become the Florida senator.
On Sunday, a manual recount confirmed Republican Governor Rick Scott's victory over the incumbent Democrat Bill Nelson.
Once again, after doing insane amounts of Medicare fraud.
Elon Musk posted on X his support for Florida Senator Rick Scott for Senate Majority Leader.
This was simply the point. But of course, Republicans want to avoid this point. Asmongold, for those of you who don't know, is a right-wing political commentator. He does have some centrist opinions every now and then. I believe he himself actually is a big advocate for healthcare, likes Bernie Sanders, but spends most of his time simply sitting around and reacting to Donald Trump. He is now officially, by my estimations, a larger right-wing political commentator than even the likes of Ben Shapiro. Very successful in this field. His videos reacting to Donald Trump get millions of views, more so than the Daily Wire could ever dream of. Asmongold also is the largest political content creator on Twitch in general. He's the largest political streamer now. He's double my size. He's always been double my size, but he's now double my size when it comes to political commentary as well. So let's see what the largest free speech defender had to say. He actually voluntarily brings this up in a YouTube video called "What the Fuck is Twitch Doing?" The YouTube video is from 2 days ago with 1 million views. The first 13 minutes of it is just reacting to the latest Ethan Klein video, who is falsely smearing me as someone who doesn't care about Israeli civilians or whatever, which is obviously incorrect, but we'll get to that perhaps down the line. He packaged that up with the Libs of TikTok video to call for my banning.
Let me see if I can find it here. I do, as I said, I do try to maintain a degree of neutrality with a lot of this stuff. And I try not to go too super hard on it. I'll link you guys the video real quick before I get into it. And
he's linking the Ethan Klein video to his audience because, to show support.
Yeah, there's the video. It's the Ethan video.
Perhaps this is the reason why Ethan Klein doesn't talk about Asmongold and his apologia for certain regimes of the past. Ethan, who really cares about anti-Semitism, of course. That's why he constantly comes after me, someone he knows has a long track record alongside him at times, attacking anti-Semites and explaining to people what famous dog whistles are and things of that nature. But that'll be for a different day.
People are so ideologically captured, it's sad. I think a lot of people are. I saw this the other day, actually this morning. Where is it here? Here we go.
Hey, Dan Clancy. Time to wish Hasan another happy birthday song, you hack fuck. Anyone else will get permabanned on Twitch for this. This is beyond the pale. This is enticing your audience to kill a sitting senator. Don't people go to jail for this? This is not me enticing my audience to kill a sitting U.S. senator. That is ridiculous. Everybody knows that that is ridiculous. The people that are complaining about this know that that is ridiculous. But I'm glad that I was able to show you the context, the full context of what I was talking about. If you cared about Medicare fraud or Medicaid fraud, you would kill Rick Scott, okay? You wouldn't make Rick Scott, former governor of Florida, Rick Scott, you wouldn't make him a prominent part of the Republican Party.
That is crazy. That is nuts. And I've said before, there's a statute of limitations, but apparently this was yesterday. Yeah, this happened yesterday even. Oh my God. How's that not against the TOS? It is. And it is an open call to violence. And I would challenge anybody who thinks that it's not an open call to violence to say that exact thing about Donald Trump and then tell me if Secret Service shows up at your house or not. Really. It's very obviously a call to violence. And Twitch doesn't do anything. Well, I don't know if they've really seen it or anybody's reported it or anything like that.
I think Asmongold is covering this because he wants Twitch to see it. He's done this a couple times in the past couple of weeks. I understand. We are ideologically butting heads on Twitch. Asmongold and I disagree vehemently on a lot of issues, all the way from the history of Nazi Germany down to the fact that immigrants are not actually contributing to the American crime rates in the way that the Republican administration presents it. They're not destroying our culture in the way that Asmongold approaches the subject matter. There's plenty of disagreements there, and I think that he's doing this deliberately, I will say, in an effort to, shit stir a little bit and try to get me banned, which worked.
The clip's too short. Maybe it's out of context. I hope so. I definitely do. Hopefully it's out of context. How are you going to...
Now, once he said this, does Asmongold go back and seek out the context? No, he doesn't. Instead, he follows through, basically packaging this as a Hassan is a radical who must be banned. It's a joke, Lamau, he responds to.
Would you tell that joke about Donald Trump?
I think people would tell way crazier jokes about Donald Trump, and people have told way crazier jokes about Donald Trump. My statement was hyperbolic. That much is obviously clear. But the intention of it was not a call to violence directly against a sitting senator, but instead was to show the hypocrisy of the Republican Party in terms of how little they truly care about Medicare and Medicaid fraud, because that happens at the point of the provider and not necessarily in the point of the recipients. They want to cut Medicare and Medicaid for the recipients to the tune of $800 billion. And in order to justify that, they will do everything in their power to lie and claim that it's actually your grandparents that are stealing from Medicare and not people like Rick Scott. Because people like Rick Scott either fund the Republican Party and oftentimes the Democratic Party as well, or they sometimes run for office as Republicans.
Rick Scott has won re-election to the United States Senate. Here are the numbers.
That's the point. Now, should the likes of Asmongold seek out further context? I think yes. I think when you have millions of people watching your videos, it would be nice to at least inform them of what the true context is. And now that this context exists, will Asmongold watch this video? Will he go back and say, hey, my bad? Maybe. I'll be honest. Perhaps he will do that. We shall see.
Donald Trump didn't commit Medicare fraud, but yes, if he did, then yes. Okay, so then no.
He then follows up with another tweet of mine. This isn't Hassan's only first foray into political violence. This was the weapon used to assassinate Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. Archive link and reply to his now deleted post. Well, I didn't delete it. Twitter forced me to delete this.
But I'll tell you this, it's not the first time. This is the second time. No joke. Yes, neither of these, by the way, have resulted in any sort of action from Twitch at all. Your Reddit advocated for killing too. Sorry for spam. Yeah, but here's the difference, right? When did my Reddit advocate for killing people? When did this happen? And also, when did I advocate for it?
He also then, to further push the narrative that I am a radical, a scary radical who advocates for violence, he shows this tweet. Briefly, my old tweet that Twitter actually forced me to ban, which is a tweet where I quote retweeted sitting U.S. Senator Tom Cotton, who was advocating to kill peaceful pro-Palestinian demonstrators all the way from April 16th, 2024, almost an entire year ago, where I famously quote retweeted the doohickey, or I guess a meme of a doohickey that was responsible for the assassination of Shinzo Abe. Now, of course, this wasn't serious. I fib. I did this in response to a sitting U.S. senator who had previously in the New York Times written about executing Black Lives Matter protesters by using the military. And this time around, April 15th, was encouraging people. I'm going to read you his words. Senator Tom Cotton said this: I encourage people who get stuck behind the pro-Hamas mobs blocking traffic. Take matters into your own hands to get them out of the way. It's time to put an end to this nonsense. This was, of course, a direct call to violence from a sitting senator, a direct call to violence against peaceful protesters engaging in an act of civil disobedience.
If something like this happened in Arkansas on a bridge there, let's just say I think there'd be a lot of very wet criminals that have been tossed overboard, not by law enforcement, but by the people whose road they're blocking.
So he then doubled down on it and said, we do things differently around these parts. I mean, he is. He's advocating for a direct call for violence. I jokingly retweeted that statement with the doohickey. But of course, that was apparently a bridge too far as well for Asmongold. I'm sorry. I've offended Asmongold's sensibilities. Of course, no comments on Tom Cotton, a sitting U.S. senator, actively urging his constituents to go out and kill peaceful demonstrators who are, dare I say, peacefully demonstrating against a genocide. Well, make no mistake, it's most likely that Asmongold is simply responding to the things that he sees in his chat. Having said that, I wanted you guys to see the full context of the story. I was obviously not asking for people to kill Rick Scott. I think that would be ridiculous. I think that justice should be served, however, and justice has not been served against Rick Scott in this case. Justice rarely ever gets served against rich people who exploit others, against rich people who defraud the federal government. You get a $10 million care package with $300 million in stock options for defrauding poor people that absolutely need this medical care. And then Republicans will turn around and act like the real fraud is happening at the point of the recipients and not the point of the providers.
There's about $50 billion estimated that are lost every year in Medicaid just in fraud alone. No one's for that. We've got to make sure we eliminate it. We have the algorithms now to do that. We have advanced technology to find it.
Thank God for Speaker Johnson.
That is my anger. That is my frustration. And every single person, not Asmongold, but every single Republican operative online, from Tim Pool to Libs of TikTok to many others, know that that is the reality. But they also want you to be distracted. They don't want you to realize that this is what the Republicans are doing. So I urge all liberals, progressives, or even people who are worried about their grandparents or their parents losing their health care, people who might be worried about their children no longer being able to receive Medicaid, to focus on who the vectors of harm truly are, what they're actually doing, instead of constantly engaging in petty squabbles. I shouldn't have used the term kill. I should have used either the term capital punishment or just punishment in general. But once again, I've let you down. I've used hyperbolic language, and that hyperbolic language has brought trouble my way. As one of the largest progressive, leftist, political content creators online in what feels like is a sea of reactionary sentiment, I am promising you that I will try to use more deliberate and more careful language going forward. Having said that, of course, in an 8 to 10 hour broadcast, when I'm constantly in a contentious battle with members of the chat, because there's always free flow conversation and a lot of back and forth going on in the community, there will probably be some moments that are clippable. But I will try to minimize them to the best of my ability. On that note, I love you all, and I will see you when I'm unbanned.